wonderful presence when we all pray together, isn't it? Well, I know it's been a couple of weeks since we've been together. I am so excited to be here. I trust and pray that you had a wonderful time the last couple of Sundays, either watching, listening, or doing whatever you decided to do. Watching and listening to maybe other preachers online, or listening on the radio, or on TV, or maybe you just one Sunday decided just to be and relax, and maybe you spent time with family, all the above. We had a wonderful, wonderful time away. And I'll tell more and more over the weeks to come about some really neat things that happened while we were gone. But thanks again. Sometimes juggling all the things that I am juggling, not necessarily physically, but mentally, it's nice to have just a little bit of time to take a breather. And so I appreciate you guys allowing us to do that. Well, this new year, I'm pretty excited. This is something, a group of messages that I was wanting to start for the end of the year, but then the holidays were coming and it didn't really fit. But last year we had walked through the life of Joseph, and it seems like to me everyone tended to enjoy that. We kind of went chapter by chapter through the life of Joseph, and we are going to embark on a journey again, and we're going to go through the book of Exodus and talk about Moses. We probably won't go through the entire book of Exodus because there's a lot of chapters in there. That could be over a year long maybe, but really focusing on the life of Moses, just before his life, his birth, and then kind of how God, where he took him as he began to lead the children of Israel. So we'll see how far I feel like we should go through in that. But I'm going to highlight primarily his life, how God laid upon his heart, or how God interacted with him, how even through his failures and shortcomings, how God was merciful and patient with Moses, just how God chose him. Maybe even if he didn't feel like he should be chosen himself. And then I want to talk about how it all works together in God's plan to rescue his people, and how it started and kind of how it ended. So anyway, we're not actually going to get to his birth today because we're just going to be in chapter 1 of Exodus. But already I believe as we walk through this first chapter, you're going to see God's plan begin to take shape already. You'll see God setting the stage for his plan to be completed. And it's really cool. Hopefully your eyes are open to see some things that you haven't seen before as we walk through this. And as we walk through the Bible together, when we do these types of sermon series, we need to keep in mind something, and that is this, that we're reading about events that already happened, right? The people we're talking about were living at that time in the moment. We have the advantage of reading about it later, so we can say, oh, he obviously messed up here, and I can't believe they didn't understand that, and why didn't they do this? We can see the replay, and we can determine where all those things went wrong, but we have to realize that we have that luxury, but they didn't have that luxury. It was real life to them, day to day, moment by moment, happening. And so I want to take that perspective with it when we look at this, that this is like you and I walking out our daily life, and sometimes in the moment we don't always make the right call or the right choice right up front, and God needs to correct us sometimes. So just keep that mindset and that perspective. And one of the main things in the book of Exodus is that God, he reveals himself as, does anybody know, what does he say he is to Moses right in the beginning of when he calls him in the burning bush? Anybody know? I am. Somebody said it back here. He said, I am the I am, right? Because Moses asked him, What do you want me to tell people your name is? Or what should I call you? We won't talk about that event today, but in a couple weeks we will. But one of the reasons I believe God uses his name to describe himself as the I am is because he is. Let me repeat that. This is really important. One of the main reasons I believe God says he is the I am is because he is. That might seem simple enough. However, what I mean by that is, as we walk through Exodus, that he is whatever his people need at any given time. Okay? He is rescuer. He is all-powerful. He is miracle worker. He is enemy smasher. I like that one. I just came up with that myself. He is provider. He is their guide in the wilderness. He is their protector, their lawgiver, their forgiver, right? Their redeemer. The list goes on, but when he says I am, he is. Right? There's other meanings to I am. But that the Lord spoke to me and said, he says I am because he is. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but the same is true for us, right? He is the I am for you and me. Isn't he? Yeah. He is what we need. He's the only thing we need. Regardless of whatever you're facing right now in this moment, we talked about a lot of things just now in our prayer time that we are facing. He is everything you need. Yeah. He is the I am for you. And with that in mind, I want to share with you something that happened on our vacation this week, where God showed me he is the I am, that he is what I need. And I hope I don't get any of the details wrong. Heidi can prompt me if I do. But we drove down to Wichita, picked up Isaiah, and we headed straight west on 54 Highway. Went through Garden City and into Lamar, Colorado, and stayed the night after about a 9-hour trek, and then the next morning headed on into Colorado Springs. Well, as you work your way up the eastern edge of Colorado there, it's pretty desolate. Not a lot there. It's a little bit rough area out there, I would say, in a description. Anyway, we went through this little town called Rocky Ford. Just a little bitty town, probably like Elwood. And we went in and we needed to use the restroom, so we all went into the restroom. And as I was in the bathroom doing my thing, I pulled out my wallet out of my pocket. I didn't want to drop it on the floor or anything, and so I put it up on the toilet paper rack. Well, I went ahead and finished what I was doing and left and just walked right out. Had no idea that's what I had done. Got back into the car, everything was great. We were just an hour and a half away or so from Colorado Springs, our final destination. We pull in, we're going to go to the Angry Chicken. I think that's what it was called. Get a little chicken. And I reached down to get my wallet out of the glove box, or the little console. Where's my wallet? Immediately, my heart rate elevates. And not within about 30 seconds, I knew exactly what I had done. Oh, I left it in the bathroom in Rocky Ford. Well, it had been at least an hour and a half. So, just a little confession. Your pastor doesn't always calm, cool, and collected under these kind of stressful situations. I was angry. I was intent. And I grabbed my phone, I throw it in the bottom of the floorboard of the car, and I said, great. Or I don't know what I said exactly, but just, what are we going to do now? Because I can't drive. I don't have my driver's license. I had $200 or $300 cash. I had all of my credit cards and debit cards. I had receipts that I needed to turn in to work to be reimbursed for several $100s worth of expenses that I wouldn't be able to expense. What are we going to do? I can't drive. Well, at this point in time, I had to use the bathroom again, really bad. I always get a drink because I always have to be doing something while I'm driving and drinking, a Pepsi or whatever. And so then I had to go to the bathroom again. Well, I said, well, I got to go to the bathroom. So I tried to walk into the Angry Chicken, and on the outside it says there's no public restroom here. Great. It's kind of a strip mall, and then it's got some fast food. So I walk clear across the parking lot, and I walk into Burger King, and it says, no restroom used without receipt. So basically, you got to go to the register and buy something, and then they give you a key to the restroom. So I'm trying to go to the bathroom. I can't go to the bathroom. This elevates my frustration. And of course, Heidi's all, of course, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it, Dad. My boys are probably going, oh great, Dad's upset. This is going to be horrible. So Heidi says, okay, well, let's go over to McDonald's, across the street. So she gets in the driver's seat, takes us over. Of course, yes, you got to buy something there too to use the bathroom. So Heidi buys a couple meals or something, and I finally get to go to the bathroom. I'm just thinking, Lord, this is a horrible start to our vacation. Anyway, Heidi decides to drive. We decide to stop in a Walmart parking lot and just because we're calling places, canceling cards. I had the church card in there too, by the way. Canceling cards, canceling whatever. And I had rented a car next day for fun. I decided I was going to rent an electric car just to see what this was all about and just have a good time and fun. And we had never done anything like that, so I had rented a Tesla. But I can't pick the rental car up and I'd already paid for it because I don't have a driver's license. And so it just seemed like it was snowballing, right? And Heidi, we prayed that the Lord would help us. Heidi prayed. I was still upset. So I kind of just said, amen. Right? Isn't it interesting how we know that praying is the answer, but sometimes we just don't want to do it?
Yeah.
Or thinking, well, maybe this situation, maybe other situations, but you're just so wrapped up in your circumstance that it's hard to understand that God's going to help you. Just being honest. So we're sitting in the Walmart parking lot, and Heidi's phone rings, and it's our eye doctor in Wichita, Kansas. Now, we had gone to the eye doctor some when we lived in Pratt out there, but we don't hear from the eye doctor very often, and we had gone to a new eye doctor here. And so Heidi's like, I wonder why they're calling me. We thought it was a random follow-up, or something. And Isaiah in the back seat says, I bet they're calling and say they have your wallet. And we're going, whatever. So we listen to the voicemail, and the lady on the phone says, hi, this is Stacy, I believe it is, at Wichita Family Vision. And I just received a call from a man named Lawrence who says he has your husband's wallet. Now, I want to back up just a second and tell you this. We had called the gas station before this and said, anybody turn in the wallet? No. Is there one? Can you find one? They searched the bathroom. They looked for us. Nothing. So we had pretty much given up hope that it was going to be found because it wasn't turned in and it wasn't there. And then this call comes in. So I called. She said, I didn't want to give out your personal information, but I'm passing along his. So I appreciated that, right? So I call Lawrence, and I'm making this really long, so I apologize, but he says, yeah, I got your wallet. He says, I'm at Walmart, though, checking out right now in La Junta. He says, call me back in 5 minutes if you could. I'm trying to get through the line, I said, okay. And so I called him back. I waited 10 minutes, and he called me first and called me back and said, hey, he said, you might want this. There's a lot of money in here and a lot of important stuff in here. I said, yeah, I really appreciate you. He goes, it's in my glove box. He said, at first I thought maybe it was going to be my party money, but I decided that probably wasn't the right thing to do. He was kidding. He was joking. But as the story kind of goes on and we meet him in Pueblo, or Fowler, which is by Pueblo, and we get there, and there is a point to this. It's right on the highway, and it's an old rundown place with keep out signs everywhere. And he's not there yet. And we're parked there, a little bit nervous. And he rolls in, and he's kind of an unkept guy. Kind of a little bit dirty, and his hair is unkept. Obviously pretty low income guy. And he hands me the wallet, and I'm almost in tears. And Heidi's in tears, shaking his hand out the window. And I get out, and I said, you don't understand how amazing this is, that you are willing to do this. And anyway, the time goes on, and he says something about, I just hope that the Creator writes my name in the book of life, and just different things like that. And I said, well, you obviously saw, according to what you're saying, that I'm a pastor. You saw my card in my wallet. Oh yeah, I saw it. And I said, well, I want to pray for you. And so I laid my hands on him, and he laid his hand on my shoulder, and we prayed together. And I just prayed blessing over him. I prayed that God would reveal himself to him in a way that he would know, yes, that the Creator did see him. And as I left, however, I thought, well, maybe I should have gone a little farther with that conversation. But of course, in the moment, it was difficult, and I did not. I still have Lawrence's phone number. And I'm trying to figure out a way to find out something to say or do to maybe get back a hold of him and talk to him more. But he said, there's a lot of drug addicts and a lot of rough people in Rocky Ford. And he said, I'm so glad I picked this up for you, because if I wouldn't have picked it up, probably you would have never seen it again. My point is this: God is the I am, and He is what I needed. And before you try to tell me that that was a coincidence, a good friend of mine who has visited here, Lauren, his daughter and son-in-law were on a trip this weekend as well. And he went and got his hair cut in a barber shop or a haircut place. And he left his wallet on the desk at his chair there. And he paid, and he got back into his car, and I don't think he got very far, and he turned right around. And before, we're talking, I think, 15 minutes or less, it was gone. And was never returned. Hundreds of dollars worth of stuff and important things. My point is this: why? I don't know why it happened for him like that. I don't. But I know why it happened for me like that. Because some of the place I've been in lately, it's just been a tough time for me, periodically. I've just been going through some things in my heart. But God said this to me. He said, I see you. I've noticed you. I see you. I'm still here. And sometimes we need that reminder, don't we? He's still here with us. I haven't forgotten about you. I still am the I am for you. And I'm here this morning to tell you, He is still the I am for you in your situation. He is what you need, and He is all that you need. You don't need anything else but Him. Okay, so let's dive in. I'll try to if I don't get all the way through it, we'll carry it over. But if you want to start turning to Exodus 1 now, you can. I'll get there in just a moment. To understand what's happening in Exodus 1, we have to understand what just happened with Joseph. Okay, so at the end of Genesis is when Joseph dies. Remember, he was sold by his brothers. They hated him. As the events unfolded, he became second in command, if you remember, in Joseph's life to the Pharaoh in Egypt. And as he became second in command to the Pharaoh of Egypt, he brought his family, remember, back to Egypt so that he could take care of them. There was a famine in their land. And eventually he restores his brothers, he restores his family, and then so he brings the nation of Israel basically to Egypt so that he could take care of them as second in command. Well, eventually he died. Joseph died, and the Pharaoh that he had favor with also died. And so, where we begin in the first 14 verses of Exodus 1, that's where we are. Okay? So Micah, if you would put the first 14 verses of Exodus on the screen and we'll read them together. It says, and they made, verse 1. Start in verse 1. Did I not have it in there right? Okay, that's fine. I can read it to you. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt with Jacob, each with his family. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70. In all, Joseph was already in Egypt. Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died, but the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful, which means they multiplied greatly, increased in number, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. Then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, they'll join our enemies. They'll fight against us, and they'll leave this country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor and brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. And all their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly. So what's happening here is Joseph, who had favor with Pharaoh, and he was second in command in Egypt, brought his people. Now he's dead. And the Pharaoh who favored him, he's also dead. The new Pharaoh was threatened by God's people because these foreigners were becoming so large in number. So the Israelites were multiplying quickly, reproducing. So he decides to take them captive so that they don't overtake the Egyptian kingdom. At this time, as a people group, country or nation would take over another. So if one nation would go and take over another nation, it was very common for them to take them into slavery as they took over their land, as they took over their cities and nations. They would take them in captivity, and then they would work them as slaves in their land. This case, it was a bit different because they didn't take them over. Joseph brought the people into Egypt, you see. He was in charge at that time. There was favor. It wasn't an enslavement initially. So Egypt didn't overthrow them, they came to the land. Well, after Joseph and this other Pharaoh died, the loyalties were not the same anymore. As we just read, Pharaoh was afraid that their loyalties were gone now. And I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it, that if a nation has become such a great population in their midst, that if another enemy attacked, why wouldn't they turn around and say, oh, we'll overtake them? We might initially think it sounds paranoia, but I think if you step back, you think, well, that might not be that far of a stretch of an imagination that Israel might do that. But then he takes it even a step further. So we're going to continue to read. He takes it a step further. Not only does he take them into captivity and hard labor, he does something even more drastic with them. So, starting in verse 15. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, then she shall live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this thing and let the boys live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous." Some of the translations say they are more hardy, and they give birth before the midwife can even get to them. So God was good to the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very mighty. Because the midwives feared God, he established households for them. The Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, "Every son who is born to you are to be cast into the Nile, and every daughter you are to keep alive." Well, maybe it's obvious here, but why is Pharaoh wanting all the male babies killed? Well, two reasons mainly. First of all, I think we all know it takes a male and a female to make new humans, right? So it takes both, okay? And also, second, he chose the males because they were the warriors. If he was afraid of them taking over, he's got to take one of the two of them out so they don't reproduce, and he probably needs to take out the men so that they don't become warriors against him. There may be more reasons than that, but those two I think are pretty obvious. They were the ones who would likely step up and overthrow the Egyptians if they realized one day that they were in a position to do so. Wake up one day and say, "Hey, wait a minute, we outnumber these guys. They put us into slavery, but we have way more than they do. We should be able to overtake them." This is what the Pharaoh became afraid of. You see, God was setting the stage here. And you might say, for what? He was setting the stage for the rescue of his people from the oppression of the enemy. And you'll see that. He was setting the stage. The book of Exodus continues as we go through it, the redemptive history that God began in the book of Genesis. Something that really caught my attention this week as I'm doing the Bible in a year, me and Heidi are, is that as soon as Adam and Eve sinned, boom, God was immediately trying to restore them and redeem them right away. He didn't wait. But from that, all the way through the book of Exodus and all the way through the Bible, God's redemptive story is one of the main themes of the Bible. From the moment mankind sinned in the garden until this very moment in time, God has been on a mission to redeem and rescue you and me. It's woven all the way through the Bible. His longing to restore us, redeem us, and set his people free. Amen. You see, no matter what Pharaoh did in this situation, no matter what he did, God stepped in and caused his people to flourish nonetheless. in the face of the violent, desperate acts by this Pharaoh, God's plans and purposes would not be stopped. The midwives didn't listen, did they? They feared God more than they feared man. But God knew that they were, no matter what Pharaoh threw at them, that they would not be stopped. Did you know that history and current times both prove that when people of God, when Christians, when the church is under the most persecution in a country or a region of the world, that is when it grows the most? That is when it increases the most, is when it's most under oppression and persecution. And those places in the world where it's illegal to hold church or where persecution is really high, the church is growing at a record number pace right now in those areas. Places like North Korea, places like Iran. Persecution is very, extremely high, but the church is growing in record numbers. It's growing in the underground or in the shadows. But you see, God's purpose and plan to restore His people will not be thwarted by any man-made agenda. The Pharaoh's man-made agenda will not stop God's plan and purpose. Okay, Pastor. That's really nice history lesson you just gave us. Right? It's even some really cool stuff that we're talking about here. But how does it apply to me in my life today? How does it apply to Mike and Tony, Ken? How does it apply to us? Well, how about personally? How does it apply to you personally? You may feel like you've been through so much in your life. How could God's plan be carried out in my life? Especially where I am right now, emotionally, spiritually, how could God execute His plan through my life, in my life? Maybe how could God ever forgive me? How could God ever restore me? How could He draw me into Himself, much less use me in a way that furthers His kingdom in my life and the life of those around me? Well, here's the good news. This rescue plan that we've been talking about, it has actually already been accomplished. This rescue plan that we just kind of started seeing, it's already been accomplished. Not just the one we're getting ready to talk about in the coming weeks when He rescues the children of Israel, right? But the rescue plan of Jesus Christ dying on the cross and rising from the dead was the final act of God's rescue plan for you and me. What did Jesus say in His final breath before His death? It is finished. What's finished? His plan of redemption is finished. It has been accomplished. You see. No matter how much the enemy of your soul tries to work through, he tried to work through the Pharisees and others who opposed Jesus to stop God's plan to restore mankind. The very thing, this is so cool, the very thing that the enemy thought would stop it, which was His death, right? The enemy thought he had won. The very thing that the enemy thought would stop this plan of rescuing man was actually the very thing that restored us. It was the very thing that redeemed us. I'm here to tell you this morning with confidence that nothing can stop God's plans and purposes. Nothing. So how does that apply to you? It applies to you because no matter where you find yourself in life at this very moment, and I think we all find ourselves in different places, right? We're not all in the same place. We're not all dealing with the same things. Because I might mention some things and you're going, well, I'm not really dealing with that, Pastor. Things really aren't that bad for me, or, whatever. But there's something that you're dealing with. Maybe physically you're walking through a difficult season with your health and hope seems far away. His provision is already done for that. Maybe emotionally the last few years have taken a toll on you, and your close friendships or relationships with your spouse or at your job are difficult. He already had made provision for that. He already has. Maybe you find yourself looking for answers spiritually. You desire to go deeper with the Lord, but you don't know where to start. Guess what? Provision has been made for that. Maybe you have bondage, chains of sin weighing you down. And you need God to do what He does. And what He's getting ready to do here in Exodus for the nation of Israel, He needs to set you free. Provision has already been made for that. Maybe you just are here this morning or listening and you say, I just need forgiveness. I need healing and restoration. Maybe you need to give your life to Jesus. Guess what? You need to take a hold of the rescue plan that's already been accomplished. It is finished. It is done. It's waiting for you and me to take a hold of it. Isaiah 53:5 says this, but He was pierced for our offenses. He was crushed for our wrongdoings. The punishment for our well-being was laid upon Him, and by His wounds we are healed. He paid the price for your physical, emotional, spiritual redemption and your healing. It is finished. It is done. You just have to take a hold of it, you see. Just like I've talked about before, if I purchase a gift and I attempt to give it to Heidi, she has to receive it. Right? It's purchased well enough. I've already bought it. I've already purchased it. But she has to take a hold of it to receive it. Yeah. You see, the purchase by the blood of Christ, the purchase has been made. Yeah. For our healing, for our redemption, for our forgiveness, for our comfort. The Comforter. For all those things that He is, provision has been made for you. The gift has already been bought and paid for. You have to just take a hold of it.
Amen.
The question is, will you take a hold of it this morning? Will you take a hold of it? Or will you sit and not receive? Because it's one thing to know that it's bought and paid for, and that there's a gift there waiting for you. You can know it and understand it, but until you reach out and take a hold of it, it's only head knowledge.
Yeah.
Will you bow your heads with me this morning? I know I got a little far away from Exodus 1 there, but it really weaves together, church. He was already beginning the rescue plan of His people. And the final rescue plan was accomplished on the cross. And this morning, if you are in need of physical healing, emotional healing, if you're dealing with a circumstance right now that seems like you don't know how you're going to walk through it, decisions that you have to make that are difficult, physical ailments that are difficult, I'm asking you this morning to reach out and take a hold of the provision that's already there through Jesus Christ. So if that is you this morning, would you lift a hand in the air, or would you stand to your feet, because we want to pray over you as we close this morning. Is there anyone that says, I want to reach out and take a hold of that healing, that forgiveness, that redemption? Well, Lord, I just lift up the people of God in this place. God, where healing is needed, I pray in the name of Jesus that you would bring that to them. That they would reach out to you and they would say, I want to receive that provision that's already been made. God, I pray for those who are walking through difficult circumstances in this very moment, that you would know, they would know that you are standing right beside them, that you are holding them up with your right hand, that you are steadfast, that you are almighty, all-powerful, and that you are the I am, because you are what they need right now. That they would lean on you and never forget that you made provision for them. I thank you for your word this morning. In the name of Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen. 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 Well, like I said, glad to be back. And go with blessing and peace. We love you all. We'll see you next week.